So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Russell and hand over. And I'd like to start, Russell, if it's okay, but just asking you, by asking you if you just tell us a little bit about your experience of taking your family to their first ski lessons in Bulgaria. Russell.
Yeah, no, look, thanks so much for having me, and appreciate people jumping on, especially if you're on the mountains. So well done for that. It was interesting. So I was fortunate enough to do the conference last year, and I hadn't been skiing for 20 odd years. And then last winter we went to Bulgaria. I'm self-employed. I can't afford quite to go into the Alps yet. And it was just really interesting. So maybe I'll talk about some of the stories. Some stuff I was thinking about was like, one was, why at 45 am I a better skier than when I was like 21? And it's probably because I'm thinking like a coach now. So my ability to coach myself was really surprised me, if I'm brutally honest. I thought I'm leaving with lots of broken stuff. And I've got a dodgy knee and dodgy shoulders. And the second thing, I guess, for my family was like, I'm always kind of observing coaching. And well, one thing is it's really dangerous. So I was definitely thinking like the coach that's got all these little kids, and I've got a 15-year-old, we've got a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old. And for Elsa, the 10-year-old, I'm thinking, how is this guy going to herd this number of cats on something where people could get seriously injured? So I was curious about that. And I think I chatted earlier with you, Ian, about like, in my world, co-coaching would exist, but this guy's on his own and he's probably got to be at the front in case anyone starts slipping, but he doesn't get a chance to maybe notice some other stuff, and spending a lot of his time doing up boots and skis. And I was thinking like, could they have had some kind of young leaders? Because my daughter's 10, and with all due respect to the 40-year-old ski instructor, he's probably quite a long way away from her. But if there's a little 13-year-old girl from Bulgaria who's like, she's quite cool, then Elsa might connect better there as well. So I was just thinking about that. And then I was thinking a bit about all the stuff that exists in our world, probably with a little where safety is slightly less of a concern. But then my son was, he found it really easy, but he'd never skied before. And he was skiing with his mum and some other kind of middle-aged lady. She can't hear me now. And he was like, he was bored really quickly because he could do the stuff they were doing. So actually he came and hung with me for the rest of the trip. And so I then practiced being a ski instructor, but I only had one person. So that was made it easier. And I was thinking if there was two of them, wow. So all this stuff's going through my head, I guess, as we talk about stuff today. I definitely don't want to step into your world because you guys are and girls are the experts in your world. And so just maybe throw you some bones and some stuff to consider. Actually, when we did the last conference, we played Bear Hunt and Ninja at the start, but as we're online, I don't think we will. So maybe just a question for you to consider. And I don't know if people want to unmute and shout out where it is, or they want to put it in the chat box. I'm cool either way. Where do you do your best thinking? What's it for you, Ian? Where do you do your best thinking?
In the shower.
In the shower. I did lip read you and I thought you said shower. Just checking. And Neve, what about you? Where do you do your best thinking?
Good question.
In the shower, Louise, James, lots of different places. So just something, I think it's something to consider. Well, I'm thinking about creative coaches and actually I don't think we make enough space for ourselves to think. Quite frankly, we'll often have a to-do list. We'll rarely have a to think about list. I think one thing that COVID has given us and lockdown has given us is time to think and possibly some time to grow. But the stuff that would come back is in the shower, is on the morning, is running, is walking the dog, is in the car, which we were just chatting about. And I currently don't have. It's a real big thinking space for me. So I'm having to recreate more time for thinking. If we're going to be creative, we need to create time to think. And then I guess also put that across to people you're working with. Like, I think, always think of the school and like, is it in the classroom, sat facing forwards, currently, 2 meters apart, that people are going to do their best thinking when you give them no preparation as well. So something to consider. We looked a lot at meetings and stuff like that, and spoke to some experts, Vim Walsh, Steve Hetwell, Kirk, people like that, and just tried to get some insight into. And I guess one of my things I'll talk about later is, well, what are the unwritten kind of traditions of meetings or ski lessons or rugby lessons, and maybe we should break some rules and make some new ones. So I often ask, what's the most impactful meeting you've ever been in? People think for a long time, and they'll have been in a lot of meetings. So what's the most memorable? Or so just something to consider, and ties in for me with I would think of coaching as like, I want to make it feel like a box set. So I'm of the Friends era. I'm just trying to get my kids into it now. So many life lessons in Friends. And like, you have one start and you also have an end. So how can you, at the start, create excitement and fun, and people are really excited about something, and then at the end, how can you create curiosity and desire for even more? So a real simple thing rugby coaches would often do is, great session, see you next week. To actually shut down the opportunity to your next sessions up. You might talk about, look, we got to level 3 today. I want you guys to go away and come back with what level 4 looks like, and you're going to start next week's session. So just something to consider for coaches is that, how do you start stuff? How do you end stuff? What I noticed with the ski instructor in Bulgaria is, as the week went on, he paid less and less attention to how he greeted people. And you have one moment when you greet people, and you might want to make it impactful. Just quickly about me. So this is probably, and something I've probably evolved a little bit since last time, was like just thinking about what coaching is to me. I'll often just ask people, what do you think good coaching is, or what do you think coaching is? I think it's an interesting question. What is a coach is a good question as well, and probably just some stuff here that I'm considering. One is that I'm trying to get them to open the front door, not like break in round the back. So I want to understand what it is that gets them excited, what's meaningful to them, not have to force them to do stuff. Stuff is so much more powerful when people realize it for themselves. So I think that's one of the big challenges of coaching. Noticing skills. So we would talk a lot about where do people stand, what do they notice. It definitely got me thinking, if I had 15 kids on a ski slope and I was at the front for safety, how would I notice the 13th kid? Which kids might I not be noticing as much as I could? I think it's I was with Johnny Wilkins in England training, and he said, "Oh, Rusty, I'm starting to understand like psychology, and I'm about 1.3% of the way there." Psychology is so important, like confidence, how people talk to themselves in skiing and in our sports is critical. So I think it's pretty tough to coach without an understanding of it. What bus stop are people at? Where are they? What's meaningful to them? How can we move them to the next bus stop? I think that's critical. And how can people be their best? What's the stuff that makes them wobble? And nothing. Ski slopes make some people wobble for various reasons, and understanding what that is and supporting people with that is critical. And I think it's on the coach really. So this is Matt Turner, played England Sevens, and I would probably rather unhappily say that I still haven't worked out how to coach Matt. So I'm always trying to kind of prod, probe, work out, ask questions, because I think my dream is to be like a super coach. I think there's only a few of them on the planet. I don't know who they are in skiing, but it might be like, I'm sure people watch this because it was on in lockdown, but it might be Phil Jackson in basketball or Scott Robertson in rugby. And I just think they get people and they storytell and they get excited by coaching the maverick, which often people kind of walk away from. So just some stuff I'm considering. I think it's a great question to ask yourselves. I work with a lot of coaches, and I ask them 3 things at the start. 1, and we'll talk about these later, what's your development plan? So what are you really good at? What are you trying to get better at? Who's supporting you? 2nd, if you have access to me for 12 months, like how does this relationship work? What would ideal look like? And then thirdly, piece of A5 paper, just write, draw. I want to know what you think coaching is. And it's just a real good conversation and probably helps people kind of condense their thinking. And it's something I've found it's been really useful, because I'm assuming that people have jumped on a lot of webinars in lockdown to actually start to make sense of all this stuff and start to attach it together. And I'll probably give a view of how I attach stuff at the moment. So, and then I just thought I'd put this on. Ian mentioned this the other day. Someone had incorporated one of your webinars is around Jean Cocteau's work. I think it's a brilliant piece of work. And I guess this is I guess, lots of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, I'll probably do it through pictures. I don't know to what extent you discussed it, but actually just giving examples or considering examples of when you do this, which ones you do well, which ones you're thinking, yeah, that's a tough one, that's a work on for me. So what am I thinking about for Rusty? Probably 10 is my biggest work on. My preference is, and I've worked in lots of environments where we're kind of going, these are the real high potential kids and we've got to get them in an England jersey type stuff. And, you know, I might be, so if I was co-coaching, if I was I would definitely be going, it would be really helpful, and if you could support the people that are struggling with Rusty and actually struggling with the session. And so in my world, co-coaching, clearly coaching groups of more than one would exist, and really intentional co-coaching would be critical. So I think I would be useful at 6, and I would say I'm very good at 7. So co-creating sessions is like, I just think it's like, I just don't understand why you wouldn't do it. I'm probably working hard on 2, yeah, I'm trying to get better at it. So maybe just something for people to consider. And I think lots of these things will pervade through what we kind of talk about today. So that was kind of my first bit, really. And so I didn't know if there was any people's questions around this or stuff they were thinking about. In Norway, when I'm sanding woodwork, that's cool. The drive to work, top of the mountain, so peaceful. Like, that was the other thing. I thought I could work really well in the mountain because I am at ease with myself. I'm like, yeah, amazing feeling being like, yeah, I wish I worked in the mountain. So if anyone's got any stuff they're thinking about or curious about, otherwise I'm cool. I can move on to the next slides, Ian.
Yep, fire on. I just mentioned in there that if anyone is interested in the transformational coaching piece, that was covered last week by Christy McKinnon, and the detail of her session is all up there on the website.
Yeah, I mean, Jean does some cool workshops around this, just, you know, bringing stuff to life and helping people understand, you know, how they can do this stuff really simply. And one of my challenges often to coaches is like, so in rugby as an example, you might see 3 coaches and they're all talking, and I almost want them to go, look, between the 3 of you, you've got to have 11 transformational moments in the next hour and a half. And actually, they then got to start thinking about, well, actually, if I take up 8 of them, then that only leaves 3 for the other 2. And actually, what stuff can I get rid of as a coach? What's the stuff that's, you know, what's the stuff that's not impactful, or what's my feedback that isn't valuable? And so I think it's a great model, and it's well done for whoever was talking about this stuff. As you're not, I mean, as people are, which line's longer than the other? And I'm sure you're all thinking they're the same. The top one is longer, so it's about 15% longer. And so the reason I show this is, like, our brains are wired to keep doing stuff. When there's one answer, our brains are really good at them. Bang, go. The reality is, in terms of learning, development, coaching, there's rarely one answer. So we probably need to think a bit more critically. And so I kind of use this analogy. There's no fence. People just do the same things. So in rugby coaching, we use tackle bags. It looks nothing like, it genuinely looks nothing like tackling a human being, yet we do it. In football, they use metal men. And there'll be some traditions that exist in skiing that you'll be thinking about now that perhaps if you change them, it might lead to some fresh thinking. So yeah, I was definitely thinking like, you've got some good people in your ski group. Why aren't they then coaching the other people, as an example? So we know peer-to-peer is very valuable. Why wouldn't we incorporate that? And so, yeah, whether people want to think about this or even put it in the chat box. So consider, what are the conventions around skiing, and pick one and break it and see if there's some fresh thinking. There's a really good book called Be More Pirate, and it talks about, oh, there it is up there, breaking the rules and making new rules. I did it with British Triathlon, and they said, oh, we could change the order they run the events in, like training, because people who are really good at swimming often don't have to chase. I was like, you always practice them in the same order. Like, that's weird, isn't it? But so if you're really good at swimming when you're a junior, you get used to being out in the front. But the reality is, at some point, you're going to. So ideally, you would prepare people for that. So maybe some considerations. I don't know if people are thinking about any stuff, or if anyone's got any things that they think are rules in skiing or traditions and they could break them. Feel free to unmute yourself. I'm definitely keen to hear.
James here. We did I think Glencoe relatively recently on creative problem solving snow sports, and the topic of conversation was slightly controversial. It's that skiing is inherently male, white, and rich, and how can we try to change that paradigm, because snow sports as a whole in the UK, USA, mainland Europe is just starting to edge into decline, similar to golf. And if we keep on going that way, by the time I've got grey hair, then the industry itself might not be the healthy industry it is right now. And what could that look like? So that's a wicked problem. It's not going to be easy answers, but it's certainly that's a topic that we were trying to creatively problem solve.
Nice, and I'll give you it's definitely a wicked problem. I love your language. So I did a bit of work with London Youth Rowing, and they were like, we're actually trying to get, same. So we got lots of tall, white, middle class people who row. And so they came up with they started taking their ergo around the schools. And then one of the things they found was they were going into areas with kind of a high number of Asians, and they didn't want to do that. But actually, when they combined it with cricket and made a game that was, so we spoke about, well, what game could you combine it with? So they could do cricket, and then you could go on the ergo for a period of time, and it would earn you runs or extra wickets. So it became part of the game. So I'm not, so I'm immediately thinking like, so where does e-gaming fit into this? How can you take something in and combine it with stuff people are already really into, or show value? So if they're playing football, this is maybe you're on the sideline and it earns you extra, lives or whatever it might be. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great problem. And because you're trapped in your kind of river of thinking, and this is how we've always done it, then you possibly need to think about disrupting it. And this is a really good way of disrupting it. And I don't know if it's the next, actually, and here's a great example. So if we kind of, I'm sure people have seen this, this makes perfect sense. And so this makes perfect sense, but it kind of takes someone to think slightly differently about stuff, to break the rules of cycling. I love, actually, it's a great time to pause it, because I love this. this fella here as well, who looks like he's having the time of his life. And there's a good, just to consider, like how do you take barriers away from people? So if you can't get them to the mountains, how do you take the mountains to them? If it's a financial thing, how do you remove that constraint? How do you create something that they might do that might in 5 years' time lead to them skiing, because it might not be an immediate thing? How do they feel confident in balance? Because ultimately that's, if you're like my son is, he was straight on the slope and he could ski straight away because he has some stuff that's helpful. So maybe some stuff to consider. And this was the kind of, I proposed this at the last conference, but I won't get us to think about it. But it might be that you take, I'm going to try and remember his name. Is it David Riding? So I've remembered it. Well done, Rusty. And I think his dad was at the last conference. So that was cool. And another way to break the rules is almost to 10x the problem. So if I said to you, right, David Riding needs to win the next Olympic gold by 5 seconds, and you stop thinking like you currently think, and it kind of, it's a bit like, instead of saying like this car needs to, needs to do 100 miles to the gallon, say well, it needs to do 1,000 miles to the gallon, then it's a different problem. So it might be that actually you go, well, we need to get 1,000 kids who've never skied before interested in skiing. What are we going to do? And then the other one was that he had to win the Olympic final by 0.01 seconds, and therefore, like, it was the toughest Olympic final ever. And so then we start talking about the psychology of the sport, probably a bit more on problem solving and all of that. So just another way to kind of think about it. And the reason this is really important to me, and if I show this slide first, is like, I'm really beyond tech-tac, if I'm honest. I'm not that fussed about tech-tac. I'm definitely interested in how we're giving people skills for the rest of their lives. And so we basically looked at, this was really from a rugby perspective, but I could definitely sleep at night, to go, what were the skills for someone to thrive in the game of the future? And we spoke about creativity, which is solutions to problems, and awareness, resilience, decision-making, and self-organizing. And so as an example, well, creativity to us was actually things like, Ollie Fox wearing a target top in training, and people get extra points if they put shots on him. And so that challenges him and that supports them. It's players setting their own challenges in training that are more meaningful. It's us playing around with our challenge cards. It's people with low numbers kicking. It's just loads of different types of stuff. So our sessions are really designed around this. And something I'll often do is go into schools and I'll read their website and it'll say, oh, we do resilience and we do this. And I'll go, well, let's design a geography lesson based around resilience. How often do you do? And they'll go, oh, why resilience? I'll be like, yeah, it's on the front page of the website. So it might be helpful if people looked at it. But that might be something you consider. So how do you persuade parents that there's some value in skiing to their kids beyond skiing? So what's the stuff that you're telling them? What's the story? Who are the role models? So actually, you need to find some role models because people need to see this stuff. You need to, story tell. So anyway, that was, some stuff I'm thinking about. I guess this is something to consider. So this is how I would organize coaching in my head. So I would, and we'll talk about practice design in a second. I would have practice design, and I'm going to share my biases now. My biases are that the work that James G. and Amy Price have done around taking the principles of video game design into sport and education are like my biggest bias at the moment. So if you imagine, there was a ski game, wasn't there? There was like when we were young, there was like a ski game and like Frogger goes skiing or something. So how do you make ski slopes feel like a computer game? So how do they have lives and superpowers? And we'll maybe reference that. The second thing is like being really aware of your coaching behaviors. So I guess something to consider is like, what would this look like for you when you're skiing and why? So we're not saying any of this is right or wrong, but I'm definitely going, how intentional are you around this? So I'm silent because I'm noticing, and I'm standing here because I'll see this. And actually, I'm doing, so direct management was an interesting one with this coach because it was about a fifth of the session. And the reason he was doing so much direct management was he wasn't doing enough priming before the session. So it might be as simple as, you send a YouTube clip out of Perman Zurbriggen and you say, look, this is the stuff we're going to work on today. Have a think about, how you could, what analogies would work or something like that. So this was really just an awareness tool and people to consider. And this has become really interesting for me at the moment. So maybe think about what you think yours would be, and then maybe ask the people you coach what it would be. So I've just started coaching England women's 35s touch, and I've never played their version of touch in my life. So I've joined a touch club. And so I now get coached at 45 years of age. So I'm experiencing this. And I'll be honest with you, so the coach is, this brown bit, corrective feedback's about 50%, and hustle is probably the other 50%. Maybe there's a bit of instruction. So there's no positive affirmation. I've yet to hear the coach. So there's two kids, there's one 13 and there's one 16. I'm like counting down how many more days till they leave, because, and there's no questions. So no one has any idea what's in my head or what's going on or what's meaningful to me or how I'm feeling or what would, am I struggling with it? Am I finding it easy? So I think this is good because, this is how I organize coaching in my head. So brain dump, practice design. So we have the ability to design practices. This is where most sports stick to tradition. So in skiing, it's one go at a time. There's a lot of queuing. And that's just the stuff that I noticed. Now, there might be other ways of doing practice. In rugby and other sports, people are rarely doing this. So an example of to consider might be, so I like secret missions. So you might spot someone who's good at skiing and actually, Fred, it would be awesome today if you could help these two people get better at skiing. So that's probably getting him to think like a coach, and you might support him with that. It's peer-to-peer feedback, which we know is way more powerful than a 45-year-old man from Middlesbrough. So considering stuff like that. So this is coaching behaviours again. So how many of your interactions are individual, small group, whole group? What did I notice with skiing? I thought it would be much more individual. If I'm honest, it was a lot of, you speak to everyone, but you speak to no one. And I do get that that's hard, because actually moving around is really hard when you've got skis on and all of that stuff. Who do you speak to the most and who do you speak to the least was something else to consider. And then these for me is like, this is the kind of magic for me, is the individual interactions with people. So a couple to talk about in my world, like analogies would be critical in skiing for me. Like, what we hear in rugby is like, so put your feet 33 centimetres apart and have a knee bend of 110. And so I'm sure you all use lots of skiing analogies. Once again, analogies are much more powerful when they come from the people themselves. So sharing a video beforehand, asking them to come up with an analogy is a more powerful way of learning than you giving analogies. How you factor in peer-to-peer would have been something. Feedback. So for me, I've tried to probably become better at taking out the eye. So that must have taken real courage to make that pass. I wonder if you could do it 3 times. So affirm some good stuff, often around character. That must have taken real confidence to go down that slope. Actually, that's probably the more important stuff than where your feet were, quite frankly. Having watched my 10-year-old daughter and my 44-year-old wife have a crisis of confidence every evening on the ski trip, and then use that moment to then stretch people a little bit. Which other one do I think would be useful? So pausing. So part of the video game design stuff is that the participant pauses. So how often do you initiate the come here, here's my feedback type stuff? For me now, historically for me, that would have been 100% as a rugby coach. Now they're doing the pausing. Oh, Rusty, I need help with this. Rusty, can I have a better challenge? Rusty, can you give me a bit of a clue as to this? So maybe that's something to consider, is actually how can you get them to come to you rather than you come to them? How do we put them in charge of their learning? Old way, new way is an interesting one, because David Murray, who I did a podcast with after meeting him at the last snowsport thing, said, Rusty, you need to look at this. And so I don't know how many people are using it, and I've used it in rugby a lot, is instead of, as we often do, iterating, and so we might go, so I might see someone in rugby and they've got their hands down, and I might go, oh, put your hands up like a T-Rex. So classic Rusty, I've used my own analogy, which I could have given them an opportunity to. I probably think I've fixed the problem, and then I move on. And then I look across 2 minutes later and they're still doing the same thing. So what David said is, actually, let's establish the new way. So the new way is hands up. The old way is hands down. But let's go between the two. So let's do 5 minutes of old way, 5 minutes of new way, because then your brain processes difference. So as people progress in skiing, taking them back to the stuff they previously were doing that was the old way is really useful. It reinforces learning as well. So just something to consider, and I've loved that. And then the last thing, which I guess for me, so it's practice design, it's my coaching behaviours, is kind of co-coaching, and I show this a lot. And this is an England rugby training session by drone, and just to show a kind of a rugby context. That's not a coach, that's Steve Borthwick. And that's not a coach. So that's coach, 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 coach. This is international coaches. There's 7,000 square metres on the pitch. They've done pretty well to get close together. And they're all looking at the ball. So what this is probably, and this was in 2016, and they definitely evolved from this point, I might add, is co-coaching that is not intentional. So actually, Ian, if you could keep an eye on the kids that are struggling, I'm going to support some others. Or Hayley, could you just do the boots up and the skis up, because actually it's going to take away from me being able to do that, or however that might be. So just being more intentional around that was something I definitely noticed that could have been done better. And across all sports, we see this regularly. Coaches standing together, reinforcing each other's biases, all looking at the same thing, and there's no kind of consideration for, well, actually, what about this little fella here, or this person here, or who's looking off the ball. So I don't know if people coach invasion sports, but rugby's a 97% off the ball sport. You spend most of your time off the ball, and not many people are spending much time coaching the off-the-ball stuff, quite frankly. And in this situation, no one is. These people are all looking at the ball. These people haven't noticed an opportunity and haven't shared the information. So just something else to consider from a coaching point of view. And the way I think of this is, and it might be that, like, who's in the empty chair? So when, as I've said a few times, when Rusty's coaching, the empty chair is the person that probably supports the people that are struggling. And I'm working hard on it. So if I have another coach with me, I'm thinking, right, well, Ian, could you do that? But often there's just one coach, and we assume there's one coach. But if there's me, one coach, and 10 kids, I'm thinking there's 11 possible coaches here. So actually, who's the best person to fulfill the empty chair? And it might be Fred. Mate, could you support these kids? It's a secret mission. I don't want Fred going up to a couple of kids and going, well, you guys aren't very good, and the coaches asked me to help you, because that's not going to help anyone, quite frankly. So something to consider, I guess, as a coach is, what's your empty chair? And what are you doing about it? Now, that might be you're doing CPD and you're trying to get better at it, but it might also be that the empty chair exists in the people you're coaching. I'm going to take a breath there, Ian. I'm mindful of if anyone has questions and stuff. Can't quite see the chat box, but any stuff people are considering? Oh, hustle. So, Adria, what do you mean by hustle? So, yeah, so actually, if you look at, Chris Cushion's got a paper on this, I'm happy to share it, and they are kind of listed behaviours of coaches, and hustle is like, come on, let's get going, da-da-da. And often in rugby, it's the coach that does the hustle, and actually, well, once again, what a great opportunity to go, look, you four are going to be in charge of energy today. if at the end of the session the players recognise it, then all the coaches will do 100 press-ups. That might incentivise them. And actually, we want people to stop being in charge of their own hustle, of course. And James, as you've said, actually, of course it would depend. I think the coach behaviour stuff is actually is just an awareness tool. And sometimes you might be going, actually, in this environment, I'm more like this. In this environment, I'm more like this. My question is always, how intentional are you around it? In rugby, it's less likely to be intentional on match day because coaches are wobbling at that point and they're having amygdala hijacks. And my other question I would always ask is like, so when you chose to give feedback that way to that person, or you chose to interact there, what was like your second and third choices? Because then you're thinking critically. So we're doing a piece of work with GB Hockey, and they've brought in the word scouting, and they've just taken it from football. And I just don't like the word. So I said, oh, cool, what was our second and third choice word? Oh, well, we just took scouting from football. So thinking critically is actually about going like, what did I choose not to do? What did I choose to do and why? So, but it's a great point. It's a great point, James. And Louise looks like she's connecting with the kids on Instagram. That's the other thing I need to be better at. And probably a nudge to you, James, is like, so how do you make contact with the kids that are on TikTok, I'm calling it, TikTok or Instagram, or, you know, when, like, I don't know how to use those things, quite frankly. So, yeah, that might be something to consider. Horace goes skiing, Alistair. Of course it was. Thank you so much. I don't know if anyone's got any questions or stuff they're thinking about. What have you written down, Ian? I saw you write down a couple of things. What have you written down? I'll unmute you. It's 5 press-ups for anyone who speaks whilst muted. Did you know that?
Yeah. I was quite taken by the slide you had, probably 2 slides ago, that had all of the symbols on the right-hand side. I think there's a fair bit more to be said clearly on that slide. Perhaps put in a little bit more of that context, see if anyone's got any questions on some of the items you've raised.
Yeah, someone asked me a great question. So I showed these the other day, and I'll go, what ones do you use? Which ones are you good at? Which ones are you curious about? And someone said, like, I think my coaches would benefit from having them in pairs. I was like, of course they would. Like, so a pause, then a replay. Now, a replay is harder to do on a ski slope because you probably come down that bit, but actually, do you want to replay that moment? Do you want to have another go at it type of thing? Do you want to try and replay that on the next mogul? That type of language is really helpful for me. And in sports coaching, often I'm going, look, do you want me to, should we delete that last one and should we replay it? Because they're still thinking about it. And I'm like, it's just going to move on. Yeah, I'm definitely open to anyone kind of talking about any of this stuff.
I was going to say, it's Louise here. I saw Russ at a conference at Student Melville's last year sometime. So in terms of seeing the practical in action, when you had the guys on the rugby pitch and giving them challenges to do, which was really nice to see. And obviously at the time I was trying to work out how I could put that into kind of skiing context. So for the younger ones, quite often we kind of took some of your challenge cards ideas and had different body positions. So, okay, like just different positions to get them to then figure out actually what is the kind of position you want to be in. So we've got zombies, gorillas, hunchbacks, all that kind of stuff, but they're playing around. So they then explore what movement or what position they actually is good to be in, optimum to be in.
Nice, that's awesome. I do definitely think there's some kind of merit in almost like this tactile handing over of a card, or they can put some stuff on it. And also for them to maybe peer-to-peer stuff. Look, I've noticed that James, actually you would benefit from being a gorilla a bit more in this session, and whatever it might be. Yeah, them setting challenges that are meaningful to them. Same again, like, and then me going, look, how can I support you with that? Is, yeah, I mean, we all have chapters in our coaching journey, don't we? And I definitely was like just coaching to the masses, what I thought was right. And actually, I did a podcast the other day with Robert Townsend, who's a disability coach, and it just like we were chatting about like how that just exaggerates your problems as a coach, and so just being more cognizant of people's needs and wants and what's meaningful to them. And I'm sure you would have learned loads from just having those cards, and then maybe getting them to design some cards as well.
Yeah, it also gives them, even though it's not necessarily choice, you're kind of, you're framing it, you're giving them the options.
Yeah, nice.
Feel like they're getting that choice, so that they're actually, they've got a bit more ownership about what's coming up next, even though you've kind of, you know what's on the cards, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the biggest motivators is choice. No one I know likes being micromanaged, quite frankly. And then I talk it like this, and so apologies, Louise, you probably heard it, but like I don't ask my daughter what time do you want to go to bed, because she'll probably go to bed at 3 a.m. But I might go, look, do you want to go to bed an hour and half an hour? And I know she'll go to bed in half an hour, and she's had choice and she feels great about that. But I've got what I wanted. Now, you might, of course, have some cards and they might contribute even more cards. I mean, for me, that's the magic, when they're designing cards for themselves and one another, and we've got some peer-to-peer type stuff, you know, can you do this? Can you go over these moguls? Can you fall over 3 times and learn from it? That type of stuff as well, that might normalize some of the stuff. I mean, the other thing that I noticed with skiing is like your reaction to how people fail can be quite significant, same as in sports. I'm always looking at coaches like that 2 or 3 seconds after something goes wrong. Like, you can lose people for a long period of time in that moment. So actually how you are with people, how you normalize, do you know what? We're all going to fall down. Like, we want to, let's replay the best falls at the end of the day. Let's talk about which falls led to the best learning. Nice. Thanks, Louise. That's cool. I'm glad that it made some sense to at least one person. And maybe this is something you consider. So if you're working in a club, or, you know, what are the top 4 or 5 skills you need? And this was, for me, really, like when I was skiing, it was like I was practicing these with my son, like questions like, where'd you feel it? Like, where about which toes are you putting pressure on? Or, you know, where does it feel in your body when you're, you know, when you're like 9 out of 10 on the slope? And I was just really curious about that type of stuff. I'm just making it up, by the way. Cool. Thanks, Ian. Thanks for that. I'll, if any questions come up, definitely just people ask. And
there's a question. Sorry, Russell, just before you move on, there's a question in the question box from Joe. He said, "Does the coaching start at the coaching session or when kitting up?" Thinking about the off the ball.
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Joe. And so I'm going into England camp in a few weeks with Eddie and the coaches. And so what do you do before the camp? Like, what's the priming that goes on? What's the, you know, and interestingly, it might even be the conversations before you get on the slope. So I'm definitely hearing, and once again, I'm just remembering stuff that I heard from when I was skiing, like lots of people saying what they can't do and what, you know, that they're really nervous. And so how you build confidence in people. So the best description I heard of confidence was James Bell. He spoke about it's 80% positive mastery experiences, and it's 20% around the peer-to-peer stuff. So that normalizing stuff going wrong and people being cool with that around their peers is really important. And maybe reminding people of, actually you said that yesterday, but remember when you did that you know, did that last run, how did that feel type stuff? Yeah, so I'm always trying to join stuff up, I guess, is my view on it. I hope that answers the question. Possibly not. And so the individual interactions are the magic for me. So whatever they look like, and this is like, you might just, you know, so we use clickers a bit. This was with a goalkeeper in hockey. I said, how can I help you? She said, you know, how can I support you today? She said, I'm working on my communication. So that was 10 times she communicated, 5 times the defense did something about it, and it led to a good outcome. So that's pretty cool, actually. So you're having some real impact. How could we make it 6 next time? What's the stuff? Defense, what are you thinking? What would be helpful? This one was recreate a famous scenario from your sport and how do you want feedback. We often don't ask like what feedback's been valuable, how do you want feedback. I think it's might be something we would consider. Then this one is actually, this was an interesting one where we gave the players a video camera and said use it, and they started recording players after they'd been in half times or coaching interactions, and just simply like, what did you remember? And there wasn't that much remembered because the coaches were giving too much information. So Louise, your stuff around your cards and actually making it memorable from some kind of animal analogy is probably more likely to have impact, would be my sense. And this is the paper around Old Way, New Way, which I'm happy to share. It's really understandable. I'm not that good at reading academic papers, but this one's really understandable. And I mean, it's really, really impactful. And yet, so when David grabbed me at the conference and said, you need to read, I was like, how has no one ever told me this? Like, wow. So it might be that skiing, you know, someone's leaning back too much. Actually, you know, and now they've worked out that they might need to lean forward a little bit, but actually let's do a couple of runs where you lean back again. Like, how does that feel? How does it compare to how you are now is a real good learning experience. So I think I was trying to say practice design, and we'll talk a bit about that, coaching behaviors, co-coaching, and then for me, it's individual interactions. I'm then thinking of individuals. So this is young Marcus Smith, under 14, a bit scared, stood on the wing, not speaking to anyone. Like, I've got to work out, like, how do we get him to here, and involved in England teams. And so this is this is his development plan. In my world, this would be really normal for coaches and players to own their own development plan and to run it and to have some shared language that's really helpful for us. As opposed to me just using my language, it's not that helpful. Some stuff I'm thinking about. So this is Kaz Morgan. I love some of the stuff he's talking about. The other thing I've said, number 4, I've noticed. And I've also noticed I'm quite compliant to touch. So someone told me to do 7 burpees and I didn't ask why, I just did it. And I was like, wow, that's weird, because I normally like to break the rules. And the other thing is it took me 3 sessions, and there's a coach who's a bit more chilled than the other coaches, and I'm just experiencing this. I'm really like intrigued by it, and it took me to go, you know, we call this thing a 23 long. Like, what does 23 mean, and why do we do it? And someone went, I'm so pleased you asked that, Rusty. And interesting, isn't it? That, and actually, I'm quite extroverted, and it took me 2.5 sessions to ask. Now, there's some ways of, you know, so having a pause would have facilitated that. Having a whiteboard or somewhere where we can write stuff down, having some common language around, you know, in the learning pit type stuff as exists in the classroom would have helped that conversation. 10-year-old daughter, same again. Oh, I didn't really want to ask him, Dad. Okay, that's interesting. So some stuff that, you know, around learning that I think is important. How can we use their language? What's the environment we set up? How do we story tell? How do we get people to think for themselves? And that's why I'm so into video game design and Joe's question about how do we prime people, but not just the body, so not just the physical stuff, but also the brain stuff, because I'm sure you need to use your brain to ski and to adapt and to all of that stuff. And then I guess this is interesting from a skiing point of view. So there's a lot of research that says that once you get beyond the group of 4, we start to get social loafing. So, you know, when we do, I'll break up into groups and there's a 6 or a 7, then there's often people who aren't involved in that. And so same with the ski lesson, like, even if you've got a big group, how do you then create some little subgroups that, you know, you guys are checking in with each other? I'm just kind of hypothesizing about some stuff. Really good mentors, and I've spoken about that. It often isn't me, so it might not be you as the instructor. It might be someone else, and that's why I love hockey have like young leaders program, and it is unbelievable seeing the under 16 kid coaching the under 14. It's like their hero has turned up. And this is Johnny Wilkinson working with some of our best fly halves, with due respect. 45-year-old man from Middlesbrough, Russel Earnshaw, did not kick a winning drop goal in 2003. And so this is both inspirational and informative, and they're probably actually talking more about some of the experiences and the mental stuff rather than the technical stuff. With the architects of each other's brain, as Suzanne Brown said to me, every interaction we have with people is having impact. Sport done well is incredible. Sport done badly, as we've seen with gymnastics and stuff like that, I would stay a long way away from. And look, I just see it, coaching as this, quite frankly. I don't see the tech tack. I see skiing as what an unbelievable way to build confidence. And I'm sure you've seen there's a couple of videos on YouTube at the moment, on Twitter. There's the young skateboarder and there's a skier at the top of the mountain and having, and then going down and that way type feeling of I've grown. So go back to what we spoke about at the start, like I would be selling that. Like it's about people's confidence. It's about growing. It's about being part of a team. It's about belonging. It's connection. It's all that stuff. Co-creation, really important for me. How do you know what's meaningful to them? How would they create sessions? I've done this is at Worcestershire Cricket, but I've also done this and this is with the parents as well. So mums are trying to give them the resilience cards. Kids are picking the creativity cards. I've done this in classrooms and same, like, how can you have different levels? So, how could you bring all this stuff in is it's just fascinating to get insight. Really, really fascinating. We had one kid who was in the under-17s at Worcestershire, and at the end of it, I said, what was your best interaction with the coach? And he said, when the coach asked me what my favourite food was. Bear in mind, this kid's a year out from being a professional cricketer. And I said, why was that? And he said, because it showed my coach cared about me and was interested in me. Wow. So that's a pretty, and the parents would never have noticed that type of stuff. I'm sure people have seen this, and this ties in with the kind of, choice stuff, but this is what drives us as humans, really. So how can we help people become more and more competent? How can we give them some choice? And how do people feel belonging? Critical for me. Unless you feel belonging, I think. So when Elsa turns up to the ski lesson and she doesn't know anyone else in the lesson, how are you going to make her feel belonging really quickly? So get in your little groups of 4, work out 2 things you've got in common. Whoever comes up with the best one can pick a coach to do 20 press-ups, and we'll break down some barriers of hierarchy with the coach, and people will already be talking about stuff they've got in common. That didn't happen, by the way. She definitely would probably take about 4 or 5 days to feel belonging. And show this a lot, really, but this is Tom. These are his kind of coaches at school. This is his coaches, England and Scotland. Medics, S&C, analysts, teenage boy, teachers. Like, when we're coaching people, there's so much complexity to it. And we have it and I don't know whether it exists in your world, especially with ex-players. So if we've got the son of an ex-player, then they are the most influential person in that kid's life. End of story. So James Grayson, people like that, his dad's played for England, then we need to be considering, like, who are the key influences for that person? Now, this might not be as important for a ski instructor, but definitely for a coach. And I'm sure, when you start to go, well, maybe we spend 10% of their time on the slopes and actually they're with their parents for X amount of time. And that parent's really challenging. So we probably needed to have some pretty robust conversations with parents in pubs to take them away from the rugby pitch. The other thing I would always be considering, and it depends upon your sport really, but like, what's changing, what's coming into your world. So we spend a lot of time looking at, some of the stuff around kids from the Pacific Islands, because it's becoming more and more common in rugby and we need to better understand them. And as I'm sure you would be with like the Generation Z stuff. So all this stuff like coming into my mind around how do we coach individuals? And this would probably be my kind of number one question. And I got my daughter to do this. So we were at a rugby thing and the parents were doing my head in. So I was like, Elsa, like, if you could write down the perfect do's and don'ts for the parents, could you do it? And then we'll put it next to the pitch, and we'll maybe get the parents to come and have a look at it. I would do this at every rugby match. I think it would be helpful. I think I might be the embarrassing parent. But how can I support you today? How can I give you better feedback? What one thing will help me coach you better? Those type of questions are like the stuff we need to really find out, probably the big questions that are going to help us with the tech stuff later on down the line. So that's probably all about individuals. So I don't know if there was any questions or any stuff people are considering there.
Few comments. Rusty, I don't know if you can see the comments on the right-hand side.
Got it, yeah.
Yeah, stuff about backboards at the top and bottom of slopes. I don't know if you caught up with that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's cool. I like it. Really useful. And yeah, maybe get people to put down what they've seen other people do well, or what's your goals for the session, or what were your highlights, or what was your best fall, or, you know, what was your best interaction with a coach. So a great way for them to give kind of some anonymous type feedback. I like what Craig said, only because I was speaking to Owen Eastwood today, and he spoke about he gets people to draw in the sand, like their journey and like the ups and downs of their story so far. But, you know, you could even get people to draw their day before in the snow, like, oh, and then I fell over, and then this, and just a real interesting way to get conversations going. Yeah, the lift is amazing, isn't it? Because my teenage son was trapped with me for 15 minutes, and there's no phone. And, I mean, how cool is that? Never get that time where I'm not, you know, that's like golden stuff. I was like desperate to, I'm sure he was trying to get on a different chairlift to me. Nice, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the idea of the chalkboard's pretty cool, and just sharing sessions. So when we spoke earlier about beforehand, so sharing a session beforehand, and, you know, getting the kids to go, look, how would you make it better, or, you know, how can we adapt it, or what bits would be helpful for you. If we're going to run this session, how can I support you type stuff? So they turn up and go, look, Rusty, today I really would love your help with this. I mean, that's where we want to be, really. I don't want to be everything led by me. I'll get going. I'm going to show this, I'll just show the start of it, just because of So, Ian, I know you really want to dance, so I'll stop it there. I don't want to get you too excited. So I'll often say to people like, well, when do you think that is? And they'll go, oh, it's like after match celebration. So this is before a World Series final in Las Vegas. And the coach, Damien McGrath, said they just weren't being themselves, and he just joined as a coach. And then someone said, oh, coach, is it okay if we sing a song before the match? And he was like, yeah, of course it is, type stuff, and probably goes along with some of the Pacific Island stuff around hierarchy. And like, how often do we ask people, like, what's going to help you be the best version of yourself? How often do we tell people, like, I've got your back, I really believe in you, you know, and help them do that? And this was interesting again today, because I was chatting to Owen Eastwood, and I spoke to Clark Laidlaw, who coaches New Zealand Sevens, and I said, what do you think the best thing is about the New Zealand Sevens program? And he said, the singing. I was like, no other professional coach has ever said that to me. And he said, it's the most important part of our program. And so interestingly, so Owen today, I mentioned this story to him, and he said, well, so it it's 4 times more powerful than morphine at relieving pain. And he said, so actually this is really normal. So if you go back to tribalism and how we're wired, this is building connectedness, this is synchronizing people, and this is releasing endorphins and oxytocin. You would be pretty foolish not to sing before a match, is how he said it. And no one sings before matches. But it's just an interesting thing. And I think my point is like, so how do we create this environment? I hear lots of stuff now around safe environment. And what does that look like? And how do we do it as coaches? And what's the type of stuff that we're going to allow our players to do? And yeah, I mean, and so they then just go win some matches. Go figure. They start singing. What are you thinking, Neve? Because you were looking at it and you were smiling and then you nodded about the singing. What was going through your mind?
No, I like that. I think there's definitely a thing about psyching yourself up. I think with that kind of music, I love that mentality. Like, you know, kind of speaking from whenever I play sport, there's just something about that kind of team camaraderie and the music. I don't know. I'm a big fan of that. I just thought it was really interesting to watch, especially on like a professional level. That kind of I'm speaking from like a kind of lower level sport kind of participant, but when you see it actually being done in professional sport, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Bobbing along.
I just did a podcast with Ailey Gibson, who's Scottish GB canoer, and actually really interesting. Just you know, an individual sport, but actually how important that rest of the team is around her. So I think the same with skiing. Like, I'm assuming if you travel lots and, you know, there's been a lot of time where you're probably spending it with other people. So how do we make people feel like a team? How do we make people feel belonging? Some stuff that we, you know, just consider, like, what do your interactions look like? Like, are they on your terms or their terms? This is Marcus Street, got the best beard on a 17-year-old kid I've ever seen. And it's, you know, side on is much better than face on with the kids. Just real informal stuff for us. I like, we use this model really, Dan Hughes' model. We challenged ourselves on this. So playful, loving, accepting, curious, empathetic. Like, Rusty, when were you most playful today? Like, when did you struggle with accepting? Give me some examples of when you were curious. Like, and this comes from attachment theory and actually helping kids, and by kids I mean probably we got kids' brains till our mid-20s to our late 20s, be the best they can be. And the All Blacks talk about serious play. I just did a podcast today with the S&C coach at the Highlanders, and they just themed after lockdown. They won 1 out of 6 before lockdown, and then they won almost all their games after it. He said, we got a chance to have a second go at our season. And the feedback from the players was our weeks weren't exciting enough. So they came back in after lockdown, and I was dressed as Tyson Fury. And our theme was around boxing, and we had a fight at the weekend. But I mean, once again, that's a professional environment. I'm all in on that stuff, quite frankly. And so I guess practice design. So this is rugby. What do I see? I see a load of players just looking at the ball, getting into formation, and this is a reflection of your practice. So if someone's struggling with some stuff on the ski slope or on the rugby pitch, then have a look back at how you practiced it. So, I mean, no one can take the ball at pace. No one can tell me where the space is. And the people who are putting their hands up are generally trying to absolve of any responsibility. They just want to go, I'm in this position, no one else can take it now. So practice design, which I referenced earlier, maybe think about how you can do this stuff. I'm sure lots of this, you know, I definitely see free play and skiing. There'll be some blocked type stuff. I'm always thinking like, and why did you choose that over something else? When you chose to do unopposed practice, why did you choose not to put defenders in? And maybe this is something for you to consider. So this is, and I can't remember if I shared this with you, Ian, or I'm happy to share it with some of Amy Price's work around. She took James G's work and she distilled it down into 5 kind of principles for coaches. And some of this I actually think skiing would do really, really well. So the mission is often a doing word. The mission might be get down the mountain. And the levels, I think skiing does that quite well. You would have some colours of slopes and different things. But even within a a little group, then actually, well, who's on level 1 where it's snow plow, and who's on level 2, and who's powered up to level 3 where they're doing it on one leg, with a bit more weight on one leg than the other, or whatever it might be. Giving people superpowers. So your superpower might be, I'm just thinking aloud, like in rugby, it might be you need extra touches. And so that person gets more opportunity. In skiing, it might be actually, that you can hold someone else's stick for a period of time to help you. Pausing, I've referenced, and definitely would be useful actually to facilitate conversations coming from the person being coached to the coached, and saving progress. You can consider what this looks like in your environment. In rugby, I call it like banking. So we might play a game where you scored some points, and if the opposition get the ball, they steal all your points, and you've got to make a choice of, do we bank the points now and risk it? And it's around decision making. I'm sure there's something on the moguls that involves banking. So probably just kind of, I don't know whether anyone's played around with any of this stuff, whether they've seen it in the classroom or in coaching. I'm not sure how I'd translate it into skiing. I think that's, you would be the experts in that. But I'm happy to share some more work around this. I don't know if anyone's considered it. Video game design. So there's a real good, if you Google James G. Good Learning, and I'm happy to share it. There's a PDF that I would recommend anyone who's a coach have a good look at. Après ski, good for the singing. The third half, I like it. Always the minibus journeys. Yeah, of course it is. I don't know, what are people thinking about when they see this stuff? Has anyone considered like trying to take some of the video game design stuff and put it into your ski lessons? I'm looking at Louise. Maybe we spoke about this last time and she's done some cool stuff. I don't know.
It has been a while. I did take some of the ideas in terms of like levels. So it's kind of like if you can complete like a couple of different, I can't even think of what I've done before. I've got them on laminates. It's been so long since I've been ski coaching because we've not been on the slopes. But yeah, I have done things where it's kind of trying to incorporate levels, so they've got to achieve whatever the goal is to then be able to move on to the next level, and just kind of that whole idea of gamifying things.
Yeah, nice.
Just dry drills.
Nice. I'm trying to find good learning, but I'll share it after this. And Joe, 100% the classroom. Like, I've asked kids to gamify lessons, and their stuff they're coming up with is mind blowing. Even, to be fair, so the pause, my mate put a pause button on his whiteboard, and it's like, change the dynamic of the lesson. Kids stop the lesson and they go, "Sir, you haven't explained that very well." And I'm becoming a really good teacher as a result of it. It's just facilitating some stuff.
I was going to say, yesterday, it wasn't in a ski context at all. It was kind of youth strength conditioning type stuff, but we've been doing some athletic skills sprints, so kind of like obstacle things, different challenges, got to chase them with pool noodles, that kind of thing. And a couple of kids started going, "Oh, well, what if we put this here, and what if we do that there?" And it's just about kind of, even though that might not have been what was planned in my head when I started it, it's like kind of letting them go with it and letting them kind of shape what's coming up next.
Nice, well done. Because the reality is, if you stop them, then they probably won't offer those suggestions again.
Yeah,
there's every chance. And I think I'm just looking at the chat there, and there was something around like theming. So theming's a really powerful way to connect people up, like to get emotion out of people. So how could you theme your ski lessons would be something I would be considering. I like it. Cool. I'll keep going. If anyone has any stuff they think about, then definitely drop it in.
Russell, I was just going to briefly,
go on, mate.
if it's all right. One of the things that has just been coming through from what you're saying is, people play rugby, but for whatever reason, I can't think why, it doesn't sound right to say I played snowboarding or I played skiing. It's this sort of really serious skill acquisition, like shove information in people's heads as quickly as possible, to get to basic turns in snowboarding and parallel turns in skiing, and enjoyment be damned. You know, what would playing at snowboarding look like? And you know, that from a lot of my experience is instructing rather than coaching, but in my limited coaching experience, that's taken the form of, like in skis, you can take one ski off and call it like the ultimate challenge. They've got to go like 20 feet, but with one ski on, and it's flipping hard, especially if they're like 8, but it's hilarious. And you tell them, look, it's going to be impossible, but who can make it to the bottom first? And things like that would maybe be a way to sort of play at skiing or snowboarding.
I love that. And I guess my sense is that I assume you do. And by the way, James, if they could do the one leg challenge and you did 20 press ups at the end, if they did it, then they would try even harder to do it. Some stuff I wrote down often. I mean, you would see this with, and I do get it. Like lots of coaches who are starting out will say to me, I just want to get through the session. Like, I just want to I've got a session plan and I want to get through it. And Louise, what you described there is like is their worst nightmare. So kids want to go in another direction. So, well, what does the next level look like, kids? What's the next level? What's level 3 look like? And I'm always, so interesting you said that, because I'm always going to rugby coaches like, well, what would a skate park or what would a snowboarding park look like in rugby? How could we make rugby feel like, you know, these sports that look like they're really autonomous to me? And the other thing that I'm curious about is like, and it happens in rugby, we coach to the masses. So my son was bored, but so the coach didn't have the skills to notice he was bored, but he never kind of went, well, he never really ascertained what level he was on. He just kind of assumed, well, he just started, so we'll start with the most basic stuff. And I guess because everyone else is on that same level, but even just a couple of little tweaks, like, you know, one leg, or, you know, try it with one eye closed, or whatever it might be, I don't know, is would have definitely got him more involved, and also he would have learned more stuff. So maybe just something for you to consider. I'm happy to Amy, shout out to Amy Price, like the work she's done and is pretty cool. And I just did a podcast recently with James G, and he is thinking on a different level. So he talks about like, well, why don't people play the game of biology? So on computer games, because they're so well designed, there's no test at the end. You don't get tested on Call of Duty. All the way through it, you're learning and you're probing and you're finding stuff out and you're getting feedback. And so, I would design a skiing with levels, 100%. And you might go, actually, so you might then start day 2 on which level do we want to start on today? Because often they went back to level 1, and I was thinking, well, some of them are on level 3 or 4 already, but they're not that excited about level 1. I'm mindful of time, but just some other stuff to consider. So, coach, just development plans would be really normal in my world. I think it's something to consider. What's the stuff that you're doing really well, and what's the stuff you want to get better at, and your kind of version of events. How are you getting feedback? I really like this, and so this will be cool for you guys. So England under-16s hockey plays Scotland under-16 hockey, and they had 2 kids that spent the previous kind of couple of days in each other's environment, so went into each other's meetings. And then at half-time, Scotland were winning 1-0, and I'm really excited about that, even though I'm English, because those English kids need to lose more often. They all go to private schools and they win lots of hockey, and it's not that helpful for them in the long run. And so they invited this little Scottish lad in, and they said, what's your feedback? And he said, yeah, our lads just want it more than you. I mean, so wow, how powerful is that, getting a little lad from Scotland to come in and tell a group of English posh kids from private schools that our lads want it more than you? And he left the room, and apparently they went, who the fuck does he think? Oh my, and there's no way the coaches could have got that response. So I know I spoke a lot about the peer-to-peer, but who's going to give the impactful feedback? For you as a coach, or for the players? And I guess my instant kind of thoughts with the whiteboard is actually, how can we give information that's going to be helpful for the coach, and actually take away possibly the power dynamic or the language. So the language actually became a problem as well on holidays. It's quite hard for people to communicate. what's your gremlin as a coach? I think it's useful to consider what's the stuff that gives you an amygdala hijack, makes you wobble, and what are your strategies around that? There's a couple of amygdala hijacks on the ski slopes, definitely. Getting really frustrated with kids. I'm thinking, they're kids. It takes ages to learn to ski sometimes. How deep do we want to go on reflection? So a big question I would ask a lot of coaches when I'm working with them, like, we can skim the surface if you want, or we can get really deep and we can have some really important questions and talk about them. And it's up to you. I'm giving them choice, as you say, Neem, but I know which one they're going to pick. But they've opened the front door for me, and then it's fine. We played around with cards. So same, I play around with this with gamification, play around with this with coaching, and trying to almost really playfully give people some stuff they might want to consider. It actually originated because we were in a camp, and I thought, how am I going to individually influence all the staff? So we had like Big Dave, the physio, who only hangs out with the injured players. So one of his challenges was, go and find out 10 things about fit players that you didn't know before. Fletcher's was go and spend time with the 3 kids least like you. So I think that's always a good challenge for coaches. I'm not going to talk about that because I'm mindful of time. This is really about what you measure stuff. And maybe consider this. So I think this is a great question. Like, if you could measure 3 things in your environment when you're coaching that you currently don't measure, what are they? So either, well, maybe shout them out or maybe put them in the box. What if you could measure or attend to stuff, what would it be? Strength of 1,000 men with a song playing in the background. Stop it, James. Yeah, I was thinking, why isn't there more music? Definitely would have music at the start of my lessons. Happiness, engagement level, of course you would. Trainee level, so that's, yeah. And also coaches level of happiness. Like, I'm watching a lot of rugby coaches thinking, oh, you don't look like you're having that much fun. Engagement level. Someone said to me, like, so 2 measurements I love. How do you feel on Sunday night about going to work? That's a good one. And in a meeting, how many people are leaning forwards? Like, really want to hear what's coming next versus, yeah, this is comfortable for me. Stokeometer, does that mean like how much people like the town of Stoke or being stoked? One or the other, I hope. So stoked, nice. Level of tiredness, yeah, maybe it's that, like, maybe it's just checking in with the parents going, what time did they go to bed? 8 o'clock, awesome. That was a great lesson. That was an awesome lesson. Yeah, I often think, well, and all of this stuff, and confidence and, how many friends they made. So if I'm honest, if you said to me, what would I want to happen to my daughter? I think I would want her to be competent on the slopes, but more important than that, confident, and she's met some new friends. I'd take that, like, literally. And maybe we should ask the parents as well. So just something to consider. And then how do you measure it? How do you attend to that stuff? In our sport, and this is from rugby, we just measure stuff. And someone said to me today, actually, it's a really good point. He said, we just measure stuff, Rusty. We never look at cause and effect. So what's going to make my daughter, so say I wanted my daughter to be an Olympic champion. I'm pretty chilled if she's not. Then confidence is going to be really important. So maybe affirming some of the stuff that's doing well, affirming her when she's being brave, when she's trying stuff. I think that is more likely to lead to better outcomes. In rugby, we just measure stuff, quite frankly. Anyway, not going to talk about that. Not going to talk about that. But we are going to finish with is this. So, Neve, you randomly picked 2 people who were going to sing karaoke, didn't you? So don't release the names yet. But if people could just kind of put their camera on now, and so that we can see you when you're singing. And we want, James has turned his off. James, put it back on now. Someone's going to be Elton John. Someone's going to be Kiki D. So I'm just trying to see who's looking forward to it the most. Oh, there's some smiley faces. I think so Neve, who are the... No, it's okay. Don't worry. No one's going to sing. No panic. But what I would say is this, like, to do stuff that you haven't done before does take a bit of bravery. It might make you feel a little bit like I'm terrible at karaoke, but I often feel like I'm about to sing karaoke. So I just said, I'm just started doing a bit of work with Eddie and the England team. And that came from me emailing him 2 weeks ago. I thought I can help Eddie Jones and the England team. So I sent him an email at 5 a.m, like thinking he won't read it because it's 5 a.m, and I can go and like put it in the box, and he read it and responded. And so that came from that. But I was definitely feeling like I was singing karaoke. And then when he rang me today, I felt like, yeah, like I was singing karaoke again. So something to consider. The other thing to consider is if you're going to make change. So I know that you open the banana at that. So that's the end you're supposed to open the banana at. And I always open it at that end. And even though I know this is the right end. And so how you make change, how you, as a coach, either for your players or for yourself is important. So that's why our cards came in. Sharing the stuff you're working on with other coaches or with the people you're coaching. I'm really working hard on my feedback. I'd love some feedback on the end about my feedback. This is around 21.9k on Christmas Eve, not because I'm Santa, but because I wanted to beat my wife. I'm really competitive. So if I was coaching, with, I might say, look, at the end, Ian, we're going to ask the kids which of us had the most transformational moments with them. And we'll see who wins out of me and you. And then we might start thinking a bit differently as coaches. The elastic band is for me to wear a lot when I'm coaching to remind me to stretch people. I'm really good at noticing good stuff. I probably then miss an opportunity to stretch people. It's often the best time to stretch people. It's rare that people want to be stretched after you've told them they're not very good at something. So some stuff to consider definitely around like how you might feel when you're going to try some new stuff. Well, let's ask Louise. Louise, how did you feel about your cards?
Yeah, I think the first time we were kind of like, oh, not sure whether it's going to work. And then it's the same with anything when you're trying something new, when you're coaching. Like, even though there was bits yesterday, that's obviously not ski related, that the girls went with, there was other stuff that I tried that just didn't work how I thought it was going to work. I was just like, oh my God, it's one of those sessions. But yeah, just it is how it is, isn't it?
Yeah, that's awesome.
If you keep on doing the same thing, then you just end up in a rut repeating the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
You're just going to get the same results. Whereas, trying new things, you've always got a chance that it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I think probably some people will be going, oh, Louise, you need to tell me about these cards you've designed. They sound awesome. I'm always thinking, like, where are the pioneers? So who are the people that are willing to try some stuff that's a little bit different? And that might be around performance, like the cyclist, or it might be around engagement and confidence and other stuff. It depends, I guess, what your end in mind is. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm definitely, if anyone has any questions, I'm really mindful of time as well. I'll share those slides in if people are interested in anything, and I've written down some stuff that I think would be useful to share if people want it. Open to any questions.
Yeah, Rusty, so I just want to say thank you very much. If everyone would just like to put a comment in the chat, whether it's one of thanks or indeed a question, we'll see those between the comments. Just a feedback for Russell, that would be really useful. So while we're waiting for questions, next week we have a further session which will be Derek Tate talking about psychology of coaching, and we have all that to look forward to. We hope to see everyone there. What have we got here? We've got some comments coming up, Rusty. Thanks, liking the imagery.
What do you mean by that, David? What do you mean by love the imagery?
David's maybe gone.
He might have gone.
Great. Trafford, you're on. I don't know if you want to say a couple of words of thanks if you're in on the set.
Can I just say, and also, like, if you ever want to reach out around stuff, I'm like on Twitter and stuff, or I think I put my email on the last slide. Just drop me a line. And I'm always keen to hear, like Louise did there, about stuff that's worked. If it didn't work, Louise, please don't ever tell me about it again, all right? But just the good stuff. No, I'm joking. But yeah, and I love, so the reality, Louise, is you tried some experiments and some stuff worked and some stuff didn't quite work, and you might iterate it. The other thing I would do with that is, I think it's really useful to signpost it, to maybe go, look, I'm going to try some new stuff tonight, and I would really appreciate your feedback on how it could be better. And the other thing to consider is, like, do you use it as priming? So in rugby, you might grab a few players and go, look, we're going to try some stuff tonight and just get your insight into it. And I'd love you guys or girls to be champions for this tonight, or whatever it might be. So probably another thing to think about, if you're going to try some stuff, think about those things.
Okay, lots of really positive questions, comments there, Rusty. But on behalf of everyone, can I just say thanks very much for coming along? And I think Trafford's just going to say a couple of words.
Yeah, no, Ian, thank you. Rusty, great session. Lots of stuff in there, plenty to think about. I think it's always powerful listening to another sport and hearing approaches that have been taken that have worked. So I'm sure there's lots that we can reflect on. Appreciate your time, and Neve, Ian, particularly, thanks so much for the work and bringing tonight together.
Nice, thanks, Trafford. I would agree. So another kind of one of the things around creativity for me is like related worlds. So as an example, I spent a lot of time with a guy who's a hostage negotiator, because lots of coach development feels like hostage negotiation, quite frankly. So if you're thinking about it, something like confidence, then maybe go and look at other worlds. So actually, is it, what do people do around parachuting, or what do people do around, holding a gun for the first time? I'm not, but those related worlds. And so I'm lucky I work in, someone's mentioned hockey. I mean, I just can't play hockey, but they seem to kind of, because I'm not a hockey expert, A, I'm not a threat, and B, I just ask stupid questions. That's helpful, apparently. So,
I was going to say, I was going to say something about, I'm just looking at Duncan Shepherd's name. I'm sorry, I'm picking on you, Duncan. But I know that he maybe came to ski coaching later than some other people, but he also decided on several occasions to race from the top of Hill End, the dry slope in Edinburgh, which a lot of fully grown men would not necessarily choose to do. But I would suggest, yeah, your camera's there. He did that to put in himself into that position. So actually getting out of his comfort zone. How do you make a kid feel confident standing up there? Well, how am I going to make myself feel confident standing up there? You might have something else to say. Sorry, Duncan.
I'll be honest, and definitely Duncan, and I'd love to hear. I mean, most nights was me trying to get my wife and daughter to convince them they were going to ski again the next day. That was like my evening. Anyway, so yeah, definitely want to hear what your thoughts are on it, Duncan.
Yeah, I've just typed that in there. I showed those kids how to hike, and all the ski coaches will understand what that means.
Nice.
I'd just like to, say to Duncan as well. If you're not prepared to put yourself in the position that the trainees are in, then you come across less knowledgeable as a coach. Whereas what you've done, Duncan, is you've put yourself in the same position so that they will take knowledge from you far greater than someone who hasn't done what you've done. So yeah, well done, Duncan.
Well, nice.
And just Craig, and there's still lots more to to learn on that front.
Yeah, look, the reality is, like, something that's really useful to do is to take away the power dynamics as well. So being vulnerable and showing that and getting alongside people, as you would all work in other businesses where you go, there's that leader that just doesn't listen and doesn't understand and thinks they're better than me, versus the person that you feel like you work alongside. I mean, I just think that's how coaching should feel, quite frankly. Nice. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.